Hi, my name is Lily Johnson. This is about my stage two of my research proposal that I started under Dr. Nicholas back in May. And this is for a class seminar in special education issues with Dr. Jody Winship. And some background on this project. I've taught fifth grade reading for 4 out of the past 5 years. Last year, my principal uh, asked me if I would like to teach a reading intervention class. Our school is fifth and sixth grade only. It's an intermediate school, and they had not had any reading intervention in over 10 years. The government had given a good bit of money to support and help with COVID, to catch up from COVID, kids being behind. And our primary school in town had hired 3 intervention teachers, and the elementary school had hired 3 intervention teachers. And he asked me if I wanted to do intervention at our school, which I loved being in the classroom, but it really sounded like something that was needed, and I felt like I would enjoy the small group scenario and prayed about it for several weeks and decided that I would do that. We used the Spire program, and I had about 80 students, which was probably too many for one person, but there's just such a great need for reading. Our school has a lot of students that are very behind in reading and are not near on grade level. 4 years that I taught fifth grade, usually at least half the class or more would be on a second, third grade level, some even first or pre-primer. It's really a great need. So, how this idea came about for this proposal was last year around spring break. I was called into the office, and the principal let me know that they were not going to have reading intervention again for this school year, which I was very confused because it was so needed and it was really helping the kids. And I just broke into tears, honestly. Um, at that point, our assistant principal, said that they were having to add a special education teacher and a pull-out one that does pull-out groups. And she thought that I would do a great job with that. So anyway, that is how I ended up in special education and getting this master's degree, which I'm thankful for because I'm enjoying it very much. But I was very upset that they were taking away the reading intervention, which is where I got the idea for this project. Um, I decided to set about to try and prove that reading intervention was needed even at these older grades. My uh, plan was to take a look at our star reading scores. Our school uses Renaissance Learning, star reading, and math. The kids take the test probably 3 to 4 times per year. And so I gathered all of the scores for my students and took a look to see their growth between the beginning of the year and the test they take early spring, late winter, early spring, and then their end of the year scores to see the growth. So that was my plan to do that. And my proposal was to follow some of the students. Now, I had fifth and sixth graders last year for intervention. And of course, the sixth graders have moved on to the middle school, so I could not follow them. I don't have access to their scores, but there were 30 students that are still at our school that are in sixth grade this year. So I was able to follow, knew I would be able to follow their scores. The sampling method was probably, I don't know, probably not the best because it had to be a non-probability sample because of the way it's done. It's not like I was choosing students to test on something. It was students that had already had something done, and I wanted to test what it was going to be like for them to not have it. So I had my 30 students. Um, like I said, I use the AR scores for the instrumentation. and I got a good bit of help just to talk through, get ideas from our reading instructional coach at the time. She was the great asset, and also for Dr. Nicholas because I emailed him over and over because I've never written a research proposal before, and I wanted to make sure everything was as it should be. So he helped me quite a bit to get the thoughts and the way things went, and just did a lot of explaining and assistance. Um, the procedures, I just uh, took their scores and I made a little. This was in my research proposal. You can't see it very well on here, but the blue lines were beginning of the year before they had any intervention, and then the red line was their February, March, and then there's a yellow line, which I regret now that I used yellow because it's hard to see on a video, but and then it shows their scores by the end of the year. Now, a lot of the students showed a lot of growth. The validity, AR is used all over the country. So I believe that's a valid test. Now, I think the research done could be applied to any reading intervention program for sure. The literature review, there were so many articles to read about reading intervention and different ways to do it and the research behind it and the best practices and everything. Uh, there's not as much as for older kids as younger kids, but still there was a good bit. So I don't know how this would translate to other subjects since it's focused on reading and the SPIRE program is for reading specifically. But I definitely think you could apply it with any intervention program as long as it is, a valid research-backed program. Um, I didn't really feel like there were many ethical issues. Um, the students, I mean, I wasn't even going to be talking to them. Nobody had to talk to them or ask them anything or anything. All I was doing, my plan was just to take the scores from last year, compare them to the scores from this year. But I still did type up, one of the permission forms home to go home to the parents just to get permission because they were minors. If this, research really was going to happen. Confidentiality, I just numbered the kids randomly from 1 to 30, and I was the only person that saw their names and knew which name went with which student. Now, our school has a good bit of kids from low economic backgrounds, and at least half the school, English is not their first language. But now the children that I pulled, was not any kids that are serviced by someone else, no special ed kids, no kids. I did have some EL students, but none that were low enough to be pulled by the EL teacher because there are 200 or more kids in the school that are considered EL, and we just have 2 EL teachers, and so they only pull the newcomers and then the kids that are super high that are close to passing their access test. So there's a big group of EL kids in the middle that are behind and need help. But a lot of the kids are non-floaty, which just means they're not part of the EL program, but yet they don't speak English at home or it wasn't their first language. I had several of those kids. All right. Also, my results. I can't really get the official results because it's not the end of the year, but I did take a little peek the other day just to sort of see how it was going because the kids have already taken, of course, their beginning of the year AR test and they've taken their, winter, late winter, early spring test. And I apologize, this is not more fancy, but the results that I got I felt were very strong. Out of the 30 students that I did the research proposal about, there were 6 that had more growth without intervention than with. Most of them, it was just like by a tenth of a point. Like they grew 0.2% by this time with me last year, and they've grown 0.3% by this time this year. There was only one that was quite a bit higher. And it's funny because he was one last year that I kept waiting for it to click with him. And I really feel like it finally did. I, which this is a biased opinion, feel like his growth is because he was in intervention last year. But there were 3 students that were their growth was the same as last year to this year. And then there was 21 who have less growth or a loss without the intervention, which that is 70% of the kids that have less growth or loss. And it's heartbreaking to have worked with these kids and see how much they've grown, and then know that 70% are not as far along as they could be. Um, this study is different, this research proposal, just because you can't, it's not connected to student achievement. It's almost like it's backwards. It's like um, my point will be proven if they have less achievement, which so far that is what I do really believe like it is going to show. Um, the changes I would make in my original plan really is just that I wish I had more data. I wish there were more kids to look at. I wish we had had intervention for several years. That would have been a better proposal. It is just, it's very sad. Also at the elementary and the primary school, they had intervention last year and they have it this year, and they have told all the teachers that they are not having it next year. They're going back to the classroom, which really, honestly, that makes me want to cry because when I've seen what it looks like on a kid in the 5th grade at 10 years old who has given up because they just can't read. And if they're not going to address it at the younger grades, that's just going to be more and more kids that come to us after having given up, and it's very sad. I think that there should be some maybe more research done for kids in the older grades and how intervention affects them. Like I said in my literature review, there's so much about the younger grades, but there is some about the older grades. I just think that there should be more. Um, and that is my research proposal. I'm very passionate about it. It really meant a lot to me, and I feel like the little results that I've seen so far are really prove my point. And I hope that I have enough guts to maybe share that with my principal and ask him if I could share it with the superintendent, because I believe it's important and it's very much needed. If the kids can't read, they're not going to have success in anything. So thank you very much. And I have enjoyed this research and have enjoyed this class.